we are through to One Way Only now. I don't know if you know, Dave, but we've changed the name to One Way Only because every time people tried to search us, they were getting bloody Blondie one way or another. So no one could ever find us. So it was just a nightmare because people say, I keep searching for your podcast. I might explain why the views aren't so great, I don't know. But people, I've had like about 50 messages saying I cannot find One Way or Another, and they scroll down, it's like on the 3rd or 4th page before they even get to one of our videos. So we are now One Way Only. Hopefully Blondie have never made a song with that or anyone else that's popular.
Good.
But yeah, just a little bit of housekeeping before we do this episode of The Struggle of Educating Neill. I'm currently potentially have COVID. I'm waiting back on results. I'm pretty all right if I'm sitting up, but I am prone to bouts of coughing, and I will be putting a filter on to get rid of these bags because I'm not a good sight. I've not slept for about 4 or 5 days now. So if I do start coughing, apologies. It is what it is. This is the only time I've spoke to another human being other than me kids in the house for the last few days. So I'm happy to do this. Illness or no illness. Well, you got to isolate and all that, haven't you, until you know. But today's topic, I mean, we've done serious topics over the last 3 or 4, haven't we? All of them, you know, you should really be taken serious, but this one incensed me. I mean, we just had a little word before we started recording, but we're going to do the topic of the arms trade, which I think really, reading between the lines, it really links in the arms race as well. The reason I say that is it seems to be the majority of the arms trade is they sell off all their old gear. Basically, you know, in the States, in the UK, France, Germany, whoever it is, well, we've no use for those weapons anymore. Rather than just destroy them, we'll make our money back and sell them to countries. And the reason I bring up that aspect of it is it's quite frightening what they're using at the minute. I mean, you look at the Joe Biden fiasco, leaving all the weapons and helicopters over in Afghanistan, and next thing they're flying them and hanging people out of the helicopters, etc. You've got to wonder, the arms race, the worse that gets and the more stuff that they're selling. You know, it's one thing walking around the streets with a Glock or a Kalashnikov or a AK-47. It's another thing with some of these up-to-date guns that they've got in the Marines if they start selling them.
I think, yeah, but now the Taliban have more weapons than 88% of other countries in the world.
Wow.
And after a 20-year war, which was supposed to crush a terrorist movement, it's actually empowered it.
Put it in a more dominant position.
Yeah. You know, when the UN pulled out of Somalia, they just left the weapons. They could have melted them down, they could have taken them, you know, and they're just there. So you're quite right. There's this second-hand market in weapons around the world, which can only lead to destruction and more deaths.
Well, it was quite strange, really. You see, the first bit of information that I come across, I always go to TED Talks and stuff like that, see if there's anything on there, because usually you're speaking to somebody who's either been in the field or someone who's working at the higher end of office, and they usually sort of pointing out the way that it's being done wrong. So I thought the ideal point was to start there, and obviously there was a doctor who'd done some humanitarian work out in, well, she said Africa. I think she said it was Somalia, but it wasn't Mogadishu. It was a small village outside. And she said that the effects wasn't even just the guns, it was people. The example she gave was a woman was clutching onto a small child that was dead because she was queuing for food, but she wasn't able to leave the village because of the gunfire. So it's even people who aren't necessarily shot or killed by that. It's, you know, they can't leave their homes and they're stuck there for days with malnourishment. And the actual scope of it, when you're listening to stories like that from first-hand accounts, is shocking enough. But the thing that shocked me more was looking at some of the documentaries and some of the paperwork on how the actual governments do everything, and it's all done with a smile. And the most recent thing I watched in the last few days was Sofex. So Jordan, obviously it's smack bang in the middle of Iraq, Iran, Syria, and God knows what else. Obviously, it's literally landlocked by the lot of them, isn't it? But the King Abdullah, I don't know if he's still king there. This is going back to 2014. This documentary I watched. He was basically has a big expo where you come and you buy whatever you want, and as they walk in, it's pretty much every general from every army that you could possibly wish for. I mean, there was a good 400 or 500 generals there. I don't know how many countries there are in the world, and they're all there to purchase. And the striking thing, you know, you can hear these stories from people on TED Talks who are giving you the first-hand accounts of the terrible thing of putting their finger in a dead baby's hands, not realizing that the baby had passed away. But when you look at the, you know, sort of the distance apart between that story of what the reality is on the ground, and then you see these salespeople, like used car salesmen in jackets. They had 16 of 20 stores all run by the Americans, and they said about 30 or 40% of the countries buying the guns from the American stores were all on foreign aid from America. So they were basically, the Americans were giving them a credit card to go eat at their own store, you know. And it's the smiling businessman who's got the suit on, and he's telling you about how this handgun will get you in this situation, and it's really energetic, and he's selling you the murder that it's going to cause on the street. And then you see this woman coming back and talking to the peers that will go and work in this office, saying this is a terrible thing, this is the reality of it. And it's this crazy cycle.
Well, we've got
it's infuriating to know what to do about it.
Because we've got an arms trade at the moment, an arms fair in Liverpool.
I saw that, and I was gonna, you see, it popped up on Liverpool Echo, and I thought if it was any other source of material, I would have read it to see what it was about, but I just don't trust the word the Echo says. So give us an idea of what's going on with that, because there's been protesters arrested.
Well, but basically, the council have allowed the building that they partially own to be rented out for an arms fair. And many citizens of Liverpool do not want their city connected with what's basically a shop selling weapons of death. However, I think, although it's terrible, it's good that it's happened in Liverpool because it's got attention. It's not in some leafy suburb or in the countryside at some glamorous hotel.
Yeah, where there's next to no one to actually notice it.
Yeah, and at least people are saying when you sell, there is a consequence. But in the 1989 Baghdad arms trade, 18 British firms sold her Saddam Hussein, and then 2 years later there was the Gulf War, and they never admitted actually what they sold. But we are basically selling weapons around the world to the highest bidder, and then they're being used on our soldiers and our armed forces. The point that just seems ridiculous.
Yeah, the point you've just made there. So the documentary I watched on that Sofex in Jordan, where they had X amount of stores, the guy had took a Marine with him from the States, and next door to his store was a Chinese store, and they were selling the Norinco rockets that were used to kill the American Marines in Iraq. And when they were looking to ask them, why are you selling these to, you know, terrorist organizations of Iraq?
Yeah.
There was just a blank look of, you know, you come and buy, that's it. This is a shop. This isn't. I mean, when it was questioned, you know, the guys who were running the show, they basically said it's a lot harder if you're a terrorist organization to purchase there than it is if you're an actual head of state. But that being said, some terrorist organizations take over states, so you have to build and form some sort of relationship with them. So again, potentially, if you're selling to the Taliban, they're now running the state that is Afghanistan.
Absolutely.
And
I think the UK has increased its sales of weapons since 2018 by £1 billion. That's the UK.
Well, that's the UK.
And there is a list of countries with very questionable human rights, and our sales to them has gone up in the last year by how much percent do you think?
Go on, give me an idea.
390%.
Yeah. So,
usually a decent government would scrutinise, and although independent companies can make the weapons, they can't get an export licence. They have to get one off the government. So the government has to check what you're selling. And under Robin Cook, this is years ago with Labour, he was very moral, but successive Labour foreign secretaries and Tory foreign secretaries are happy for anything to be sold.
Well, yeah, the arms trade treaties in place, isn't it, to basically monitor any state, you know, in terms of their morality and how they assess whether arms are going to be diverted or used for, you know, real purpose rather than, you know, sort of any humanitarian crisis or war crime. But the UK joined pre-2010, hadn't they? And they sold a lot of arms to Saudi Arabia, who then used them indiscriminately in Lebanon. And
Yemen.
The news article I read, I think it was The Guardian, said that effectively they admitted that they didn't assess the sale and the export of the weapons properly. And then basically at a later date, when it had been followed up as to why you're going to make an inquiry, they said, well, we think in the future, despite being signed up to the Arms Trade Treaty, we will probably just keep it solely to war crimes that we see in our assessment as a time that we would not sell. If it's something maybe as a humanitarian crisis that we're not sure. And I'd read that in an article that I was just, I mean, I'm not a particular fan of The Guardian. I was just scrolling through anything that had arms trade type articles. I think I was going back to 2014. And the fact that they just retracted that and said, well, we have signed up to the treaty, but, you know, we'll still do what we feel is our moral compass, not the prescribed moral compass that the rest of the world agrees to. You know, obviously they're not making any money on the deal, we are. So, you know, unless it's something really horrific, we're not going to bother. So you find it hard that, you know, these are people that we elect.
Yes, and also the defence ministers, right, are touted all the time and sort of groomed by all the arms companies around the world so that they can get their contracts, and that when the defence ministers leave office, they go and sit on the boards of the arms companies.
Well, yeah, well, Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld were the classic examples of that following 9/11, weren't they? He was it Lockheed Martin? He was involved in Cheney and Rumsfeld. I may be wrong on that. Apologies if I am, people, but I think they had ties with some of the major suppliers for the war, and it's just pure money spinning. You know, they even think that Cheney was pretty much in charge, and that, you know, Bush was the face because they'd never get Cheney elected, and they were pushing for the war all along. Whether that's conspiracy theory or whether it's true, I don't know. The film, I know, definitely pushes towards that. But it is quite fascinating to look at from an outside point of view, but it's actually devastating when you think about it. I was looking at it from the point of view in terms of people, well, you know, like charity starts at home, why get involved in something that doesn't really affect us on the ground? But the majority of the people out there who complain about immigration, surely a lot of the displacement of the immigrants is due to these types of scenarios. I don't think many of these people want to leave their homeland.
No.
They're put in a position where it's die or don't.
Absolutely. I mean, we had in Parliament several years ago was a discussion on should we bomb Syria or not. And they voted overwhelmingly to bomb Syria. So we bombed Syria. And now we've got Syrian refugees fleeing because their country is in tatters and there's no plan. So absolutely, you know, the consequences of the arms deals is totally ignored. But if you think of the Security Council of the UN, they have 5 permanent members, which is China, the UK, the USA, France, and Russia. they happen to be the top leading 5 arms dealers in the world. So it's a bit like, someone compared it once to the RE department in a school, preaching love and forgiveness in the classroom and then flogging knives in the playground. And then what would happen? Children would stab each other. You know, Russia and China wouldn't allow a peacekeeping troop into Darfur because they said it wasn't needed, but they were actually supplying the weapons for the genocide.
Yeah, that is quite a clear thing. The thing of what is so vexed, they were quite prominent, the Russians and the Chinese, in terms of what they were selling. Sorry, I had the point then, but I didn't want to interrupt. I mean, in terms of the issue you got there, going back to when you were saying about Syria, when Assad was basically, was it sarin gas he was using or mustard gas?
Yes.
It was sarin, wasn't it?
Yeah, chemical warfare banned by the UN.
Yeah, and I think it was Cameron at the time. This is going back, my memory's a bit fuzzy on this because this isn't something I've researched, but when you mentioned Syria, I mean, we didn't even sell them, the guns, but we just dropped guns on the streets for them, and I believe it was discussed at the UN at the time, because effectively I think Cameron was saying, well, either we can let them all be slaughtered or we can drop these arms on the ground. And he said, we do know that they will fall into terrorist hands at some point, but we either look at it from which is the greater good point of view, we can try and help these people save themselves and then deal with the consequences later. And subsequently, you know, whether it was the right decision or wrong decision, I'm not sure on that. But looking back, obviously, it helped give rise to ISIS, which is the weapons fall in their hands. Surely putting an army on the streets and helping them in terms of that. But again, then you're risking your own soldiers. So there are situations where it's catch-22.
I was going to say, for balance, right? Because British intervention in Iraq, Afghanistan is very questionable. But in Sierra Leone, when Charles Taylor led a rebel, vicious army from Liberia into Sierra Leone for the diamonds, it was a united force from Nigeria and from Britain who went in and stopped that. So that was a successful solution. So you can say that they would never have been able to defeat Charles Taylor unless they had the weapons. So we do need to produce weapons to defend and to protect innocent people.
Yeah, I mean,
but that's one example out of... You
could look at World War II when Hitler broke the Treaty of Versailles and invaded Poland. I mean, we all know, in retrospect, where that led to, the invasion and what his real plans were. I'm assuming at the time, obviously, they had a lot, because it wasn't Churchill at the time, was it? It was the Prime Minister before him, I think, when it ignited World War II, wasn't it? But assumedly they had intelligence to say, this fella's a nutter, he's wrote this book called Mein Kampf, and he really likes killing people, we need to do something and intervene, and plus he'll get a stronghold. But the intervention there, looking back on retrospect, a lot of people died, but it could be a completely different world if it wasn't for our intervention. So I think you don't even have to look that far for when intervention is necessary. But again, did we have that issue following World War II, that all guns and tanks and stuff were just left for people to...
Well, can I say, we're still finding on Crosby Beach World War II bombs. And every 15 minutes, someone, and it's usually women and children, are maimed or killed by landmines.
Yeah.
Cambodia had a war in 1970. You can still... the killing field. You can still actually step on a landmine today, right, in Cambodia, because nobody cleans up after a war.
No.
No one has an exit plan, and that's why Afghanistan is the mess it is, because they didn't really have a proper plan on how to end it.
And where I mentioned the arms race as well before, a little bit more extreme and a little not less to do with the initial idea we had of talking about the arms trade, but the majority of nuclear and uranium that people get comes from the fall of the USSR. I remember watching something on a CIA agent who they basically picked up outside of Turkey. He drove across the border, picked up uranium, put it in the back of a taxi, and they only stopped him to check out he looked a bit dodgy, and it turned out he was stoned, and he'd been paid by a terrorist organisation to go pick that up. They had no idea who this kid was. And it's strange, really, because obviously I never really think of that sort of stuff as the arms trade, but it's not really, because you're not buying and selling, but there's just stuff left around, and it sort of goes hand in hand, really. You can't talk about one and ignore the other to some degree, because it's more about the responsibility of the people who produce the weapons than it is the actual trade of them. I mean, I know obviously it makes it that much more of a dark sin that they're actually making money off it, but the fact that they're so irresponsible with it after they've used it as well is another, it's just negligence.
Yeah. Also, apart from the manufacturers, there's the brokers as well. Channel 4 did a really good episode of Dispatches where they got 2 sixth form schools. They got a group of students and they tried to see if they could buy stuff off the internet. And a nice all girls Irish school in Dublin managed to get a broker in the Czech Republic in Prague to buy them torpedoes and sort of rockets. And he said, I can buy it, but I won't be able to ship it over to you. Here is another contact. So they got the other contacts, and from the library in their very nice school, they were importing weapons of death.
Well, yeah, I mean, you only need tall browsers to go on the dark web, and you can buy small arms. I mean, I don't know if you can buy bigger arms on that. I assume they would use it for that, but if you use the onion route and use that, it's like encrypted, so they can never find your VPN, so no one knows where you are or who you are. You've accessed it, and you know, unless it's a police officer on the other end trying to catch people out, if you've got the right person, you know, next day you can have whatever turn up on your doorstep or wherever you arrange it to be. And I think that they look at these types of things, that's kind of scary that you've got the dark web for that. But when they were talking about, so I was going through all sorts of the arms trade treaty, and it didn't ever cross my sort of reading of the news over the last few years, but I didn't realise Donald Trump pulled out of the arms trade treaty following Obama signing it to enter it. His reasoning was that it encroached on their Second Amendment rights to bear arms. So he was just sort of, you know, he's a big NRA advocate, isn't he? And, you know, the whole country and Western, yeehaw, let's go out and shoot something, and, you know. Well,
I think to balance the discussion, you would have people who would say that weapons are a form of defence. And if you don't have them, you're inviting yourself to be attacked. So, you know, you lock your front door at night as a precaution. Countries have weapons as a precaution so they're not attacked. So some people would say it's an important point that we are not made vulnerable. And also, if we are then going to make sure we're protected, that we buy the best weapons. And in order to do that, you have to go to arms fairs, you have to negotiate, you have to look around. Sadly,
I'm all for self-defense though, but
pardon?
I'm all for self-defense, but there's a level of it. I seen the Australian comedian Jim Jeffries did a thing of, he goes, yeah, I'm all for self-defense. He went, but who needs an effing sniper rifle? He went, you sat in your house window thinking, see that prick a mile away, he's getting too close to my property, I'll shoot him now. You don't need a sniper rifle, you don't need automatic, or I don't know. But the problem is,
the UK exports sniper rifles.
Yeah.
Thousands of them. And we are providing, this is the awful thing, right? There's ordinary people with families and a mortgage who are going to factories making sniper rifles and sending them off to other countries.
The instruments.
We are the second, I think we're the second leading.
The first largest.
Of small weapons.
Well, they said the largest of arms states. So
right. Well, we've climbed. We've actually increased. So some people would just say it's a job, but I mean, you have to ask yourself, what kind of society is happy?
So it's a traffic one, but I wouldn't do it.
Yeah. You know, you've got whole communities, sadly, where is it Rolls-Royce makes certain helicopters, British Aerospace, etc. And if they don't work there, where do they work? And they are making these weapons. They think they're making a helicopter, and then suddenly it's used in war zones, and then they go, well, it's got nothing to do with us.
Well, Saab is one of the worst, because I think the Swedish Saab, the mild-mannered country that everyone says is socialist, they make all the, they've actually got, which is facial recognition. You can have like a drone or something, like a couple miles down the road, and it can be shooting you out the sky by recognising your face. And they used to make all the, what's the word for it? All like the tracking systems and the GPRS and stuff.
Yeah.
The aircraft, they were doing all the electronics on the aircraft. And the Swedes, you know, they run this company and basically keep it all in-house. And apparently it's really secretive, Saab, and what they make. And apparently it's quite devastating, the impact that some of the weaponry that they build and make there, because they still have all these large expos where they're selling from country to country firsthand, because it's all cutting-edge stuff. I'd seen it on one of these documentaries that I watched over the last few weeks, but yeah, they didn't come across a people company to where, in terms of what you're saying, in terms of morality of what you're doing. Just find it, you know, I do see the need for defence, but at the same time, you do have gun and knife crime in the UK. You can't get away from that, but the extent of it in comparison to the States, you know, you don't have a gun in your house, I assume.
No.
There are actually a surprisingly high number of people who do have guns, whether they're on farms or in rural areas for clay pigeon or whatnot, and they keep their own. I've spoken to a number of people like, you've got a gun. You know,
they haven't got a handgun, because after Dunblane,
certain
guns were banned in this country.
I think they can have pump action shotguns and rifles, can't they? But they have to have a certain length barrel, because if they're too short, they spray, and they're obviously not for clay pigeon shooting.
Yeah. You know, from your own vineyard, is it?
No, it's not. No. I had this like tumbler of cola because I did the podcast for the fighting yesterday, and it just wasn't enough to keep me sort of like that, because I haven't been sick. So I haven't got a pint glass at the minute because we've just moved. So I've got one of Roxanne's gin glasses. So I look like I'm telling everyone I've got COVID and I'm drinking a big half a bottle of red, but I'm not.
As you save the world.
Yeah. As a telling as it is, obviously.
Yeah.
But to be honest with you, I just find the whole situation sort of. It said something I watched that was about 2016 said it was a $60 billion industry, and the one that I'd watched in 2014 was saying that it was a couple billion, and they were saying it was basically doubling year by year. But one of the things they said was during the 2009 and 2012 credit crunch, the crash, the stock market, they were still doubling their profits because war does not stop.
Oh, yeah.
And it continued to flourish as if nothing had happened because there were countries out there that had oil reserves and gold that could just back up the funding. So what you've got to think is when you come to those times and you're in a country like America or Britain, because Gordon Brown sold our gold reserves, if we hit really hard times in terms of a crash, we're in a position where there are countries out there that can just afford to outdo us. And funnily enough, where we linked it in with the arms race before, as much as I'm going on about it's a bad thing, I do like to watch things on weapons and the army and stuff like that. The Americans, when they were in Afghanistan, basically weren't developing too much new technology. And apparently the Russians and the China at the minute are in a position where their naval fleet can scupper the Americans because they've developed hypersonic torpedoes and missiles that effectively, they go so fast. Guess how fast they go? Keep in mind, Mach 1 is 700 miles an hour at the speed of sound. Guess how many Mach they do? 14 and a half Mach. So that's just, but they go so fast that the nozzles that they've got build up this amount of plasma. And because it builds up this plasma, any radar technology that they've got cannot detect them. So they'll detect them going off because they fire them from subs. They come out the water and they know that they're there. They hit Mach 1, 2, 3. And then when they get to about Mach 7, they build up this plasma. And they do that within about 10, 20 seconds. If they haven't already, hit them with something to put them off, like, they fire off incendiaries and stuff to take them out the sky, they're done. And then basically, the way the Americans do their naval fleet, they have the main destroyers off the main aircraft carrier in the middle. And you're looking at stuff like that. It's like, if they can send them hypersonic, they can send nuclear warheads hypersonic. And if they can't detect them coming in their surface-to-air missile defense, you're in a position there of mutually assured destruction, which again might seem like a deterrent, but it's also pretty selfish. If it's between Russia and the United States, that's two countries that, are so large, the entire world's engulfed in nuclear war. You're never getting away from that. Even if you're on the Arctic, it's going to destroy the world. So it's actually quite a scary position when you look at just what they're capable of now. And the Americans have fallen behind in certain areas as well, just because they've spent so much money on this war and so much focus in Afghanistan and Iraq, the Middle East.
I also think another point to mention about the arms trade is that this is going back to Margaret Thatcher. But, Oscar Romero and El Salvador and the death squads there, she sent the British Army over to train them, the death squads.
She was also famous for saying, "Don't let the media in," when they went to what's the Argentinian, the Falklands.
Yeah,
she was ruthless. Really was.
I think the whole problem is that the arms trade is a business, and it's a very secure business. So if you enter it, you will make money. You will flourish, and they justify it by saying, "I sell the weapons, I don't use them. It's up to other people to use their free will," which is just ridiculous. Because I think, is it one person dies every minute because of the arms trade?
Yeah. I do think I'm not so sure about Germany, France, and the other places that are high up, but I know in the UK and America, it's the way our mindset's built. And I'm not anti-capitalist. I actually think there's great benefits to capitalism, but it's that idea of, I watched a video where they were going on about the way we treat our workplace and our governments and our councils and how our local governments are. You employ the person who performs the best. and they compared it to this guy who was running SEAL Team 6 in the States, and he basically said, no, high performance is one thing, but you've got to have high trust down here. We could have a commander who is medium performance, maybe even low, with high trust, and we put him there first, and they assess them outside of work and what they do, and you know, they look at all these attributes and they say the high performance is good, but when you've got someone leading, and you know, and then you look, you compared it to the way we run our governments, and it's, well, high performance. Well, that excuse of, well, I'm not to blame for what he does with the gun. That's me thinking high performance. That's me making an excuse so I can make a big sale, make a lot of money, and then the government go, well done, you've just increased our budget this year. We can go do whatever we do down Trafalgar Square, or the Tories or Labour or whoever's in at the time.
Yeah.
And it's that attitude of, you can just manipulate your thought process to, yeah, it's, you know, I sold them the gun, but did I know they were going to shoot all them kids? And you're like, well, if you had that, whether it was high performance, medium, whatever, if you were anywhere higher up on the trust scale, yeah, you'd have stopped for a second, use your moral compass. And we don't look at that aspect. We just say, this guy has 90% sales. This guy has 20%. Trust this guy, leave him with your daughter. That guy, nah, never bringing him around to the barbecue. But he does this, and he's going to sell that, and we need that money. And that's all the consideration is. And it was quite interesting to see it come from someone who runs the SEAL team, which is supposed to be the most ruthless of all sort of operators in the army in the States. And it's like, when I thought about it, I thought, I've never been to a company that's ever been interested in the personality. They've always been interested in, what can you do for us today? And it's the same with governments. You know, if they're not producing figures, get out. It's not about that. That's why we've got so many corrupt people.
Yeah. Do you remember virtue ethics at all?
Go on. I remember the words.
Virtue ethics was an ethical theory that said it's not about the actions, it's about the person. And that it's all like, have the virtue of trust. That's more important than an action. And that we should raise people to be, not to do. Because people of trust will always make the right decision. Yeah. Now, you can say that's a bit watery, but that SEAL leader has identified virtue over action, where utilitarians would just say, do you know, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter as long as you get the end result.
Well, that's it,
but the end result brings no virtue, no values, nothing.
But the utilitarian,
we are more than our actions.
The utilitarian, you get the end result of what you initially wanted, irrelevant to the consequences, and that's the thing. You know, you just it's what's going on when you look at it from sort of a, you know, taking a step back. I always feel like now, whenever I see things, I'm just like, you know, they wanted this to be done because of this reason. They weren't really bothered about all the, you know, collateral damage, and you see it time and time again. And
and I think we have lost virtue, really.
Oh yeah,
we've just gone for end result, and I think perhaps with the pandemic and people reevaluating their lifestyles of what they want to do and what they don't want to do, and our lack of faith in our leaders and our lack of trust in them may result in a renaissance or a revival of virtue ethics, where people do think honour and truth matter. But sadly, with the arms race, it's cash and it's profit, and human beings, some choose profit.
Yeah, I was watching, you know, where you were saying that, and I don't want to get away from the arms trade sort of thing, but watching Boris Johnson the other day explain away all the workers that they're trying to get to work in the tunnels, to transport everything in the lead up to Christmas, and the fact that people aren't going to have food at Christmas, and that it's a worrying state. And I'm not worried about it. I'm just sitting there, of course you're not worried about it. You live in number 10, mate. You're not going to care in the world. You know, you're just brushing these questions off with just, Yeah, no, it's not a problem. We'll get it sorted. Honest, and winking at the camera and then ruffling his hair like an absolute lemon. And I'm just sitting there thinking, this guy who comes across as an absolute buffoon. I mean, essentially, obviously, he's not dealing with all the military aspects, but he gets final say. This guy who can't even say, look, it's been a bit of a hash up. We've had a problem with Brexit. It's going to get better. We're going to do this, this, and this, and this. And I'm going to sack him, and him. Simple. Just be honest. Just say it as it is. Just say, yeah, things got ballsed up, but, it's a government. When has it ever gone straight to normal? But you can't even do that. And then he's making final decisions. And he's shown his underhandness with school dinners. How can you trust him with the arms the company make on a regular basis and sell them to? If he's not prepared to give you a full £5 meal as a child who's near starving, how can you trust him to show the moral compass to say, maybe we shouldn't sell them Libyan terrorists the guns today? Oh, it's 90 million for the gun. Nah, we'll take the money, go on, it's fine. Yeah, I just don't trust people like that in that position. And again, it goes back to what you were saying about virtue ethics and what that SEAL team commander pointed out. It just made so much sense.
Yeah, that we need better people who then will do better actions.
Probably they all come from that same pool of, I don't want to sound like it's sort of a classist thing, because in the same way that I think that they're all basically toughs and they all come from the same pool. There's a couple of people from around my neck of the woods I won't doing the job either. It's just, how do you go about it in terms of, obviously you're talking about a renaissance and stuff, the very sort of vague terms of how we're going to go ahead and, make any changes, if any, especially specific towards this arms trade. They have the treaty there, which supposedly is getting better, but as it got better, the states just pulled out, and they're the biggest abuser. The UK are obviously abusing what I said about Saudi and Lebanon, but the biggest abuser of it, who the biggest sellers, they just pulled out of the treaty because it didn't suit them anymore. Different presidents in 4 years' time.
Yeah. What should be interesting as well is that the Newcastle Premier League football team, right, who were desperate to have investment and to do better and to get rid of their owner, have now possibly going to be, well, they will be financed, but with a Saudi Arabian horrific abuse of human rights, but that money will pour into the club and potentially could make them really successful. And
I mean,
you see, those Newcastle fans are a bit powerless, or are they? Because do they just accept? So
fill me in on this. What human rights abuses have they committed? The conglomerate that's took them over? Because I have heard and read about this, but when I saw another club's got more money than Everton, I just turned it off.
No, but basically they are very much part of the infrastructure of Saudi Arabia.
Right. Okay. So there's abuse against women, beheadings, homophobia. Yeah.
Yes.
So just also, basically, is it like the Saudi government have took it over?
Well, no, but it's a company with very strong links.
Right. Okay.
So they're making their money from Saudi Arabian involvement, and it's not just the deaths; it's the torture, it's the regime that you can't step out of line. It's also
I'm not laughing at what you're saying. I'm laughing at the fact it's sort of Mike Ashley and his 0-hour contracts. Or,
yes.
It's sort of, how bad was Mike Ashley that you couldn't take him back?
Exactly. And they will have been saying, get rid of him, he's dreadful, he is awful. And now Saudi Arabia, the journalist who they picked up and took to their embassy and mutilated and murdered, right? And then what they've done to Yemen, and millions of people have starved. So it is a brutal regime that doesn't represent the Muslim faith either. It's just purely capitalistic. And
Sorry, I was saying Lebanon before. Sorry, I meant to say Yemen. Sorry, I was saying Lebanon when I was talking about it. I've looked at so many different Middle Eastern sort of countries in the last 48 hours, and I'm not read very well. I'm delirious. Sorry. So you go on. Yeah, no, I understand the point.
So that's really difficult. I years ago went for a job interview, and when I got the letter, it said at the bottom it said in partnership with British Aerospace. So there was a Catholic school in partnership with a arms dealer, right? And it came up in the interview, what do you think of it? I said it was a moral evil and I would do everything in my power to get rid of the partnership. The head said, we do get money for computers. Surprisingly, I didn't get the job. They said I would be a destabilizing influence, and I was far too, passionate about my subject. But one person on the panel said, a lot of the children have said, should we be in partnership with an arms dealer? You know,
because they're going to go home and speak to their parents, and even if they're not, you know, the parents are going to be sort of, that's a bit, but surely it's not just yourself, you know, the parents should be saying that, you know, I'm not happy for the kids to be going to school. Like you say, Liverpool, they've been up there protesting and stuff like that. Do you mind saying which school that is, by the way? Because I'm quite interested.
It was St. John's and something in Blackburn.
Oh, right.
But you see, a lot of the parents, especially where the nuclear power station is, they'll all work there, and a lot of parents work for British Aerospace.
Right.
So they're happy to be going and developing their career making weapons, and then they're helping out their school. But I contacted Dispatches Channel 4 because I was so outraged, and they said up and down the country, a water board had funded a school and then been done for pollution. A tobacco company was funding a school in partnership with, you know, cigarettes and and you think that those companies can approach the schools anytime they like, but the school, the governors all sat round and thought cash or morality, and they went for cash.
Yeah.
No virtue.
When you get your GCSEs at Sacred Heart, you do it with a Cuban cigar. It's like, yes. Love it.
Yeah.
You know. Walking around with your school uniform with bloody, I don't know, Lockheed Martin written on it or something like that.
You know. All year 7 can blow, PSHE is blowing smoke rings.
Yeah. It's just like, you know, all having asthma attacks on course C on the cross country.
Yeah. You know, but it's like, I think there should be greater legislation that prevents arms companies trading unless it's in very, very restricted areas.
But the problem you've got is you can't implement that in every country's local governments. Let's say every state's specific government, because they're responsible for their own laws. You know, it's like when they've gone over to Afghanistan and they've tried to impose more Western laws, and well, obviously the way they dealt with it doesn't always work because they have a different set of beliefs. If you do it like they've done the arms trade treaty, you have to sign up to that treaty. And what are you going to do with a country like America? You're going to tell them, well, we'll restrict what we send you. And they're like, well, we make pretty much everything ourselves and export to you. It's you who will suffer, not us. So with a big bully like America or Russia or China who control gas pipes and oil, and how are you imposing those sorts of agreements? Because you can't even do it militaristically, because you are in a state of mutual assured destruction with a country like that. and you are effectively, you know, your North Koreas of the world and stuff, that they're not really too bothered about pushing the button. They're just psychotic. So again, the improvements in legislation, I understand what you mean. That is what's needed to do it but I just don't see it as effective or happening any time until something big happens where there is a big turn.
Yeah. I also think they should look at conversion as well, that companies that make the weapons, right, can they make anything else? Because if you think in the pandemic, they made the masks, and people convert all the time in business, capitalism. You have to be flexible, you have to look at the markets and change. If we invested heavily in non-military businesses, then people would have choices. I think now the job market is so poor that they're going for military contracts because it's a guarantee.
Well, I think one thing that gets overlooked, they do it a little bit with the police, but non-lethal arms, you have different types of tasers. You've got those beanbag guns and stuff that put people out. I mean, the water cannon, if you really want to include that. But you have technology that can do facial recognition and shoot someone from miles away from a drone. You can't make non-lethal arms for people to use in their own home to attend to the Second Amendment right in these countries, therefore giving them very little reason to say, you know, you can incapacitate someone, that's fine, but shooting them for being on your property might be a little strong. You know what I mean? So the whole point of your system is to rehabilitate, not annihilate. And you preach one thing and do another. So your Second Amendment rights in that sort of aspect could be fulfilled to some degree. You could still have to use for handguns maybe, but then you'd be able to push the states into some sort of treaty, because it's not really affecting them domestically, it's only affecting them globally. And then they're put on the global stage in terms of, is it just that you don't want to miss that 400 billion because that's really immoral? And then, you know, they're in a foxhole, then they've got to come up with some other reason why they need it. But I would suggest that would be one way, because that seems to be, the Americans have got this idea that if the government ever tries to overthrow them, they need their arms. That's part of what was written in the Constitution, and people in the sticks seem to believe that that's a definite thing that could happen. And you know, potentially it could be, but is it something you worry about on a day-to-day if you're a normal person? Is it something you worry about? Boris is going to send the troops out and just lock us up?
No.
So do you know, if someone was to give me something like, you know, an upgraded taser or something that I could have in the house under lock and key so the kids don't go tasing each other and giving themselves defibrillations, that would be ideal. Than accidentally getting hold of me gun and shooting themselves or someone else. And
also living with that absolute fear. I mean, when the school shootings in America, right, and how do you stop that, because they have now become so common and frequent, only in the US, not in Canada. And Trump said, if we arm the teachers, then the teachers could just shoot the kids dead and no one else would live. Everyone else would live.
All he's doing is making the teachers the target. They're the first people will be shot.
And then I thought, what do? Say to someone, you're a very good teacher, but you're not a very good shot. So we're not giving you the job, but you're excellent with the gun, you know. And how do you learn when someone's got a gun? The teacher's got a gun on them, stood in the front of the classroom.
What's that in your pencil case? Put your hands behind your head.
I've asked you not to talk. Now I'm just gonna reload.
Do you remember the pencil cases that were like Pepsi cans? Still one of them in gun shape. Just it's a pencil. I'm only joking, but I understand what you mean. I think though that the states has just got this. You could say that to a teacher, but I guarantee you, after even if the bizarre thing happened, which could happen, they built a wall. 5 minutes after it happens, one white teacher is going to shoot a black kid and it's going to be up in riots. Or you're going to have, did you shoot that kid as a, what do they call it, a good kill, like they do with the police? Was it a good kill? Because then you're going to say, well, he was pointing the gun. Did he try and shoot you? I don't know. The kid had a gun, man. I just, you know, is a toy gun? Oh, you know, there's all these situations that then arise from that. And teachers are effectively cops. You have to have a good kill. Otherwise, you get 2 or 3 of them bad kills and you're in jail.
And I would hope that you just didn't have an afternoon's training and then they just gave out the weapons.
Oh, have you not seen some of the training that they give out now? I mean, I can't do it. Like, you know, I've not got guns or nothing. But they have these things now. They'll stand you with a thing in front of you to shoot at, 2 at the side, 1 behind, and they're like, bang, bang, turn around, bang, 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 bang. And like, they'll shoot like 4 or 5 people in terms of these targets within about 4 seconds. And you think, you're giving people training like that. What happens if the teacher has a bad day? He walks through the metal detectors. What if the kids have worn him down and he has a bad day and you let him walk through the metal detectors and he starts going, he's got all the training in the world, he'll take out the other teacher, bang, 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 bang. It's an impossible situation. You can't give people guns in schools. Just
no. And also, surely the children who want to do the harm, they need a lot more mental health support for several years before that, because you're hoping that they never get into that dark place. So again, virtue ethics, developing their character, supporting them, guiding them back from the dark place that they're in. But there isn't, we've cut the services for mental health in school. So again, we're not providing alternatives.
I feel like in terms of the mental health, I don't know if the figures agree with what I'm saying, but I feel like that it must have soared since social media. The suicide rates in the past few years, it's become like a thing. It's like the amount of people who post their suicides. There was a guy who does, have you ever seen Vice do this series where they put a mask on someone, they sit down and they've worked in some industry where it's a terrible industry to work and they're anonymous and they just tell their experience.
Oh, right.
And this is a guy who worked for Facebook who basically sued them for PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And effectively what his issue was, he was the one who filtered through everything, good video, bad video, this, that, and the other. And he said on his first day, like the guy who just started with him just started screaming, "Oh my God, someone's killing themselves live." And there was just some fella cutting his wrists or something. And he said, they told you, you might see 1 or 2 dead people in a day. And he said, the first day, he said, I'd seen about 18 dead kids on 18 dead videos. He said, there's child abuse, there's all sorts. People are trying to post it on these forums. And they put it on as to say, like that little cover saying, this is sensitive information. He said, you click on it, it's horrendous. And he said, you go through that and you're doing an 8-hour shift and they ask you if you want to do overtime. And he said, oh. I did 2 to 3 years of that. And he said, there's stuff like cats getting killed and stuff and just like torture and stuff. And it's, when you look at social media, how many people are posting themselves trying to commit suicide? It's like a last cry for attention. And I think social media helps push that sort of, you know, everybody else in the world is wrong. No one faces up. No one faces up to their own life and their own, you know what, maybe I'm the dickhead. Maybe I've got to look inwards. You look on social media and it gives you all the outs and excuses that are there. And I just feel like people do need help, but the help they need sometimes is a bit of tough love and just not, and everything they see of the world is negative as well. And I think that couples with it, you know, in terms of the videos and stuff that are transferred. Yeah. Whoever posts, oh, I'm having a great day today. I've just done the shopping and I had this voucher in my pocket. I didn't realise it was £5 off and I feel amazing. No, what they say is I was just in the queue and some fat dickhead got stuck in the aisle and, you know, it was terrible. I had to wait 5 minutes to get my cornflakes and, you know, no one ever posts something nice. And I feel like it's just, it's got to be a massive feed into society. And it's funny enough, that Bowling for Columbine was around about 2000, 2001, which I'm sure they had massive, you know, high school massacres before, but that was around about when we just started finishing with MySpace and stuff by then, and Facebook was coming about, and the spates of those types of things have soared and skyrocketed.
Yeah.
The Australians did the right thing and just did away with guns after theirs, and they've never had one since.
No, I think, and again, Dunblane and ours, but
yeah,
America's got to really seriously think about what it is doing to its children, and to deal with the gun lobby, the Second Amendment, but also, you know, the right for those children to be able to go to school in peace.
Yeah,
you know.
I think as well, America suffers a lot through drugs, which again ties in, because one of the facts that came up was that the Mexican cartel's biggest place to buy guns is the free market in the States. They have a free market, don't they, where you can purchase. So the main contributor to their problems at the border provides them with armament. I mean, you can build all the walls you want if you're selling them surface-to-air missiles or whatever it is they're buying, because they have a lot of armaments. You know, they're coming through that wall whether you want it or not. So it does show you that sort of, I'm going to build a wall and make me sound really good. I'm also going to make 40 billion off selling to the Mexican cartel, who are the people I'm crying about coming over the wall. So it's bizarre. It's bizarre. It's all money fueled, and it's all. Again, it's sensationalized.
And it's creating those scapegoats that it was the Mexicans that caused all the trouble, says Trump. But he didn't say, so we're not going to sell our weapons to them.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Conveniently forgot that.
Roxanne said to me, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, I know I do it a lot, because I'm not a bit of a knob, sorry. Roxanne said to me, he is the single most best sort of advertiser and marketer of himself. A lot of people hate him, but all the things he's done. And she said, there was this video he brought out about the snake coming across the river, and it bit him, and he said, what did you expect me to do? I'm a snake. But the way he'd done the video and sort of made it out that the Mexicans were the snake, and when we let them into our homes, what did you expect me to do? Of course I bit you, I'm a snake. And it was like, she was right. It's that. And that was coming through social media. It was on my Facebook feed about 15 times a day. And I don't go searching for political videos.
No. I also think, though, that Facebook, again, because it's controlled by certain companies and certain individuals of mega power, they manipulate narrative, you know.
100%.
And that's the problem. But I think we've gone on.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's, just before we got any conclusion we can draw to it in terms of any which way to go. I mean, and obviously you said in terms of legislation, but I kind of sort of blew that out the water in terms of the
I think the government can stop licenses. So I think that you need a government that holds the private companies accountable.
Yeah.
I also think the Army and the Navy and the Air Force need to speak out to say that if the private companies keep selling to other countries that become our enemies, then our own people have made weapons that have killed our soldiers.
Would you not maybe think of employing a system of maybe not Amnesty International, because they've had issues in terms of the toxicity within their own sort of governing body, but a company or organisation similar to that maybe being put in legislation as an outside impartial observer who regulates, you know, sort of like you have the ombudsman for financial, and then you're culpable and answerable to an organisation that is for the people, not the governments. And
I think all those means should be used. We should explore them all. I think at the moment you can make any weapon you like and sell it to the highest bidder.
Yeah,
but we need in this country to make sure that we are only selling in a most ethical way.
Yeah, the one thing I noticed about the article I read on the UK when that happened with the Saudis going into Yemen, killing indiscriminately, was, well, we did address the treaty, we did follow the procedure, it was just sort of, you know, we didn't assess it properly. And no referral to the Hague for war crimes there, because it's like, well, they did try. And I don't think that treaty's really, I mean, this was 2014, but it's not implemented.
I also think with COVID, you couldn't fly to certain countries. There was a red flag, right? We brought that in. I think you should be able to sell to countries that have got a red flag for human rights, and just bring in those policies. So I think the government could do a lot more in legislation. I think we need to return back to virtue ethics of being more moral people.
Yeah, that hit me hugely. That hit me hugely, the way he described that, and I was, for me, it made perfect sense, because everywhere I've worked where things haven't always gone to plan, or something's been found out at a later date, going, really, we've been doing this. This is terrible. Why are we doing this? Go, well, you wanted them figures. Okay, yeah, but we broke and bent every rule along the way. Now we're looking at being, you know, targeted by like the SRA or something. I'm not saying this about any particular company, if anyone asks, but I've worked with a lot of solicitors, and you're like, Jesus, yeah, you have to hit targets, but don't do it by that means. What are you doing? It's insane. And I think that works through the government, through all businesses in the UK, because it's all just so target driven. But I think on that note, yeah, I think that's the best we can really come up with for this. Any ideas, message me on the next one. If anyone wants ideas, drop them in the comments below, because I'm not got any particular ideas for the next one in about 2-3 weeks. Yourself, if you do, Dave, let me know. Make sure you hit the like, make sure you hit the subscribe, and leave any comments. If there's stuff that we've said that's wrong, or you think's right, or you know, you just want to add your 2 pence worth, go ahead and do it. Enjoy. Have a good week.
Okay.